Good afternoon, Representative Dargan and all the members of the Legislative Committee. I'm working with Representative Vicki Nardello with Ray's Bill HB 6563. Good afternoon. My name is Janice Malinsky from Cheshire. Thank you for the opportunity to address this committee on the importance of mandating the way law enforcement and medical examiners respond to investigations in missing persons and the unidentified dead. Statistics can be overwhelming. Strange names for databases can be distracting. But I'm going to ask the committee today to consider these numbers. Right now in America, there are 160,000 missing persons. Right now in America, there are 60,000 unidentified human remains being stored in coroners and medical examiners' offices. One of the leading homicide investigators in the world, Bill Hagmaier, has publicly stated that a majority of missing persons have been murdered, their bodies scattered in swamps, roadside ditches, and buried beneath moss and branches deep in our forests. If thousands of missing individuals are now lying in morgues as John and Jane Does, the only way to identify these people is with DNA samples. The samples must be collected and uploaded by medical examiners into a national databank. Those samples will be compared to DNA samples collected by law enforcement officers while conducting missing person investigations. A computerized scan of the two DNA samples will seek matches from the missing and the unidentified dead. This is happening all across America. Yet the law enforcement community and the medical examiner in Connecticut resist their mandatory participation in the program. Most law enforcement officers in Connecticut have not received adequate training in the collection of DNA samples, and they are not properly trained in how to assess the national data banks to input the DNA reference samples. Technology has exploded in the past 15 years, and the training of police officers in Connecticut is lagging years behind the science. Imagine the entire city of Bridgeport vanishes off the face of the earth. Then imagine 60,000 unidentified dead are found on the coast of Stonington, the woods of Andover, the swamps of East Lyme, and in every marsh and meadow in Connecticut. Could we identify these unnamed dead? Not with the system we currently have in Connecticut. It's too random, too dependent on the initiative, a caring and compassionate police officer. By mandating the changes spelled out in Bill 6563, the state of Connecticut will join Florida, New Jersey, and Oregon as leaders in solving this national crisis. May I continue this? It's going to be, is this okay to keep on going? Okay. At this very second, there are 700 people missing in the state of Connecticut, 600 unsolved homicides, and nowhere is that information centralized and shared with law enforcement and medical examiners. We have no clearinghouse. A person goes missing in Waterbury, and that information doesn't make it onto the state police website. Police officers in New London and Greenwich would have no idea either. This has to change. Power is reluctant to admit its flaws, and the Police Chiefs Association spoke out against this bill 2 years ago. West Hartford Police Chief James Strelacci testified before the Judiciary Committee that we didn't have a problem in Connecticut. Less than 2 months later, there was a missing teenage girl found imprisoned in a basement in West Hartford. The 15-year-old girl had been missing from Bloomfield for nearly a year and was found imprisoned, ironically, in Chief Strelacci's town. It is time for law enforcement to accept the fact that it isn't a West Hartford problem, a Waterbury problem, or a Connecticut problem. This is a national problem. Bill 6563 is an important step to closing the vast divide between law enforcement, medical examiners, and public trust. In closing, I would like to say that I never imagined in my wildest imagination I would ever be sitting in front of a legislative committee testifying about missing persons and the need to mandate training for police officers in Connecticut. But then again, I never imagined my 31-year-old son, Billy Smolinski, would go missing in August of 2004. Everything that could go wrong in his investigation went wrong. The local police did not treat the case seriously, lost 7 individual DNA samples, and had no idea a national databank even existed. It was a perfect storm of inadequate training and incompetence that led me to champion mandatory changes in the way police officers handle missing person cases. My husband Bill and I may never find out what happened to our son 5 years ago, but we are committed to making sure that no family in Connecticut has to suffer the pain we are enduring, a pain which is directly linked to inadequate police training. The gap between science and procedure can only be closed by mandatory training, and I pray that the committee has the strength to look past police objections and do the right thing for the people of Connecticut. Thank you.
Thank you, Janice. Questions from committee members? Any questions? I know, Janice, that from the last time you came to testify before this committee, that Post from that time has put out a report, and we appreciate your help in this manner to us. I know it's something that you work on from a personal level at an incident with your own son, and we appreciate you coming here today to testify before us. Any other questions or comments to Ms. Solinsky? Thank you very much for your testimony.
Thank you.
Sue?
My name is Robert Thomas Paternostro, and my testimony today will support raised bill number 6563, an act concerning the investigation of missing person reports. Briefly, I'd just like to state an opinion on Section 2E of that bill, which reads, the law enforcement agency shall not be required to obtain written authorization before it releases publicly any photograph that may aid in the investigation or identification of the missing person. I'd just like to suggest a personal opinion that somewhere in that legislation, the family is given the right to first at least give their input into whatever photo might be released. I think that the sensitivity of the situation calls for them to have some input or say. However, my main goal this afternoon is to lay a foundation for a new system which I believe will be extremely beneficial in the process of identifying missing persons as well as saving lives. First, I'd like to thank the committee for hearing my testimony this afternoon, and I'd like to apologize for not having a copy of my statements available for you. However, I will gladly provide them afterward if required. I'd also like to applaud the committee's members for their foresight in recognizing the need to mandate legislation standardizing the procedures for law enforcement agencies to follow while conducting a missing persons investigation, as well as their efforts in constructing such a bill up to this point. Having been in the unfortunate position of searching for a loved one, I can assure the members of this committee that its work is both greatly needed and greatly appreciated. I come here today not only to praise the current bill, which I believe is necessary, but to present a proposal to implement a new system which I believe will reduce the amount of time families and loved ones are left in limbo with the agony of not knowing where and in what state their loved ones are in, while also, and possibly more importantly, increasing the flow of vital information in a much more timely manner, which will result in a substantial increase in our hospital's abilities to save lives. To the best of my knowledge, which I admit is constrained by both time and resources, no system of this kind exists throughout the country on either the local or national stage. This system, which is of my mother Kimberly's design, would require an electronic document be created every time an unidentified person is treated in an emergency situation. The document would consist of various identification factors such as height, weight, eye color, hair color, and other distinguishing characteristics such as tattoos, scars, piercings, birthmarks, or any other feature which might aid in identifying a patient. The document would be entered into a state database and eventually into a national database, since, as you can imagine, it would be terrible for a loved one to remain unidentified merely because an accident or crime took place across state lines. This system would provide for both hospitals and law enforcement agencies to enter and to access pertinent information. By providing a link between hospitals and the missing person database, we will be able to locate and identify missing persons receiving medical attention and provide the hospital with potentially life-saving personal health information, while also lifting the burden of complete uncertainty from the family and loved one's shoulders. At the same time, we will be able to relieve law enforcement personnel from the daunting task that locating a missing person consists of, including the constant pressure, manpower, and resources that these things entail. While, of course, this will only apply in cases which the missing person has received medical care, I am certain that there are more than enough situations in which such a system would provide the benefits to the missing person, the hospitals, and the family and loved ones, and the law enforcement agencies that I have previously mentioned. In closing, I would like to once again thank the committee for hearing my remarks today. I'm aware that such a proposal will take a great deal of hard work and dedication to implement. However, I hope that this exposure today has highlighted to you the potentially vast number of benefits such a system would offer. I look forward to discussing this topic in greater detail with you in the near future. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert, for your testimony. Any questions to Robert? Senator Stillman.
Thank you, Representative. Thank you for your testimony, and I hope that you will give us some documentation in terms of your suggestions so that we can share it with committee members as soon as possible.
Absolutely.
Okay. The other thing is that this suggestion about generating an electronic document to be shared, et cetera, if someone has not been identified. Do you have any idea if that already exists on a national level? Because if we're talking about sharing information across state lines, et cetera, I didn't know whether you had any research on that.
I have knowledge pertaining to the hospital side of it. I believe that the missing persons database is linked federally, and so I believe that that information is available to authorities. However, the focus of this system would provide the hospitals access to, obtain information as well as input information when they get an unidentified person, coming under their care. And as I said, to the best, to the extent of my knowledge, no, such a system is not in place. I certainly can vouch for Connecticut hospitals on that.
Okay, so this information that law enforcement agencies share is not shared with hospitals, is that?
Exactly.
Okay.
And ideally, it would, go from both sides. Both hospitals and law enforcement agencies would be able to access as well as to, issue reports into the system.
Since it already is a federal law about sharing missing persons information, it sounds like a good idea to share your idea with congressional representatives and senators and see if they can't do something on a federal level rather than just the state of Connecticut. So I'm not saying it wouldn't be helpful to us here in Connecticut, but I could see expanding it so that hospitals have similar information would be valuable all over the country.
Well, certainly, I agree. And just once again, for the record, I'd like to state that it's my mother Kimberly's design and idea.
Please thank her for us.
Absolutely.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Further questions? Hearing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Rieger, president of the Melanie Eileen Rieger Memorial Foundation and past president of Survivors of Homicide. Our beautiful 19-year-old daughter Melanie was strangled to death in our Waterbury home on May 24th, 1994. Needless to say, this horrific tragedy has changed our lives forever. We cannot fathom what families like the Smolinskys have had to deal with in not knowing what has happened to their loved one. My wife Wanda and I are appalled at the treatment the Smolinsky family has received from law enforcement agencies in Connecticut. It is as if they are the felons in this case. Jan has been treated as a common criminal, having been arrested, fingerprinted, sued in civil court, and forced to hire an attorney in her defense. The most important factor in missing persons cases is to begin looking as soon as the report is made. Mark Class, a good friend of ours and father of Polly, has campaigned throughout the United States for immediate notification and search in missing persons cases. We were involved in supporting the family of Mary Ann Measles in New Milford. Police had assumed she had run away. Instead, she was brutally tortured, and it took 9 months for her badly tortured and decomposed body to appear. As time passes, the odds of finding these people alive diminishes exponentially. Secondly, we must use whatever technology is available to help in the identification of missing persons. DNA evidence must be entered into national databases such as CODIS and NamUs. It is unconscionable that authorities are not using these important technology tools to help solve missing person cases. We must be able to provide resolution to the families who have waited so long to find out what has happened to their loved ones. Thirdly, this data can be used in identification of the persons who caused the deaths of these missing persons. Some may be serial killers who continue taking innocent lives. I would suggest that some of you may attend the 13th annual Melanie Eileen Rieger Memorial Conference Against Violence to be held at the Department of Correction Maloney Center for Staff Training and Development in Cheshire on May 13th and 14th. This nationally known conference will feature such speakers as the DC sniper's wife, Mildred Muhammad, and Mark Klass, whom I've already referred to, as well as George Adams, an expert on the NAMUS system. George Adams is currently the program coordinator for the University of North Texas Center for Human Identification and provides training and case support for criminal justice agencies. Details can be found on our website, www.melanieriegerconference.com. In conclusion, I would strongly urge you for passage of the bill so that these wonderful families, such as the Smolinskys, may have an increased possibility of finally knowing what happened to their beloved son, Billy. The Smolinskys have dedicated their lives to supporting and implementing these new technologies across the country so that the over 150,000 missing and 60,000 unidentified dead may finally be found and or identified. We must utilize latest technology so that we may resolve these unsolved missing person cases. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Doctor. Appreciate your input and saddened by your loss and everyone else's as well. Any questions? Representative Mike?
Not a question, but I would just, this bill has been before this committee for a few years now, and I just hope that the committee chairs can find a way to move this bill forward so that we don't have to have hearings on this subject again. So I really urge the chairs to try to craft a bill that we can get out of committee and move on. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Michael. You are correct. We've had a bill similar to this previously, and that did move along and create some changes in terms of work that's now being done at post. So, but this is sort of the next step, and with everyone's help on this committee, hopefully we can do something meaningful with it. Representative Bocus.
Thank you so much for your testimony. I just wanted to assure you that some of us have attended the memorials in the past that you've had, and the dates, the 12th and 13th of May, are very difficult for us as we end our session.
Correct.
So I don't want you to think that we haven't read the information that's come to us, and I don't want you to think that some of us haven't attended. I have personally attended, so if it's at all possible, we'll attend again, but I just wanted you to know that we have been there. Thank you.
Thank you. I have brought some information which I will leave for the
You can
committee.
leave that with the clerk.
Right.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Bill Smolinski. Welcome.
Hello, thank you, Chairperson and fellow members of the committee. My name is Danielle Rai. I live at 18 Pearl Street, Milford, Connecticut. I'm here today to testify on Bill number 6563, an act concerning the investigation of missing persons. I unfortunately had the experience of my brother being murdered. However, his murderer confessed to the murder and turned himself in. Unlike the Smolskys and other families who deal with missing persons incident, I want you all to imagine that you go home tonight to your loving families. Everything seems normal as you go through your usual routine, settling in for the evening, waiting for your spouse and children to come home. Your children come home with your spouse from the day's activities. You all eat dinner together. Your spouse has plans to meet some friends for a social event after dinner. Your spouse tells you, "I love you," and they'll see you and the children when they return home. As always, they are home at a reasonable time. But this time, they didn't come home at a reasonable time. Now you're waiting. It's now 4 a.m. and they're still not home. which is very unusual for their patterns and behavior. You've been calling their cell phone since 12 midnight. You wake up and your spouse still hasn't returned. It's now 6:30 a.m. The children ask where your spouse is. You don't know what to tell your own kids. Your spouse is always there to see the children off to school with a big kiss and hug. You're calling all your spouse's friends only to find out that your spouse left the social event saying they're tired and want to go home. You never see your spouse again. What happens next? You call the police only to be told there's nothing that they could do. I want you all to imagine today that your adult child leaves your home and to go to a club with friends. Your child tells you that they'll be home around 3 a.m. but never come home. Your child has a habit of this behavior, but usually calls in the morning, but no calls. Hours pass, no call. You start trying to get in touch with your friends of your child, and they say she never went out to the club. You have no idea where your adult child is. This has never happened before, and now you worry about the what if. You call the police. You're informed that your child is an adult and there's nothing that they could do to help. Months pass and there isn't any new information about your missing loved one. You hear on the news a body is found floating in the river. You wonder if it is your loved one that is found in the river. Understanding that we all have freedoms and liberties in this country to come and go as we please. However, when someone's patterns and behaviors are out of the ordinary with no extenuating circumstances in their personalities to justify the behavior, it warrants immediate action from our first responders, meaning the police. There are over 150,000 missing persons and 60,000 unidentified dead in our country. These numbers may seem insignificant compared to the total population of our wonderful country, but would be significant if one of those missing persons were someone you loved. As president of Survivors of Homicide, many of our members' loved ones have not been found. Some family members have been missing for over 5, 20, or as far back as 30 years ago. The misery they suffer is long and everlasting. In closing, Bill number 6365 may create more work within our judicial system, but that is so incidental in comparison to dismiss an opportunity to possibly save someone's life. Thank you very much.
Thank you for sharing your testimony, and sorry for your loss
Thank you.
as well. Any questions? By Linda Smolinski.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
My name is William Smolinski Sr., father of the missing Billy Smolinski. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to address this committee on mandating the way the law enforcement and medical examiners respond to investigations into missing persons and the unidentified. The purpose and intent of this legislation is to centralize the location and dissemination of information concerning missing persons. It is intended to bring all available information from initial reports to DNA to a centralized location that allows all agencies access to vital information. It is also to develop standardized reporting and response techniques for local and state agencies. It is not intended to change the agencies responsible for conducting physical searches or to change agencies currently with primary responsibilities, including municipal police and fire agencies. It is not intended to limit the resource brought to a search but rather than to bring all available resources, including volunteer canine search and rescue teams, who have the ability to assist law enforcement in rapid and thorough response. From a father, mother, or sister perspective, knowing that there are resources available, databases that already exist, and knowing that they are not implemented, add to the pain and frustration that we and so many others feel. When Billy was first reported missing, there was no response. He was an adult, free to go wherever he wanted, whenever he wanted. The fact that we gave information that suggested otherwise did not seem to make a difference. We had no idea where to turn. We have learned so much over these long, painful years. Some of that is contained in the legislation. This legislation is not for Billy, but for all the Billies now and in the future. We have had the opportunity to learn so much about the capabilities and volunteer resources and how they can work with the police and fire departments effectively. They are trained to do this work. Their dogs are trained to do this work. We have learned of many other ways of others who struggle the way we do every day. We have also learned that no system is perfect. No legislation will bring everyone home, but it's a step. If it helps just one family, it's a success. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, and again, we are very sorry for your loss of information at
Thank
this point. So, and I hope someday you hear something.
I hope so.
Yes.
Thank you.
Anyone have any questions?